everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Rock Your Shine After You've Been Cracked Wide Open. And today I have a guest that is going to be talking about a subject that is so near and dear to my heart that we have never covered on the podcast yet, and that is about generational healing, breaking cycles, etc. And I would like to introduce to you Ashley Ann. She is a guide for those on a spiritual awakening journey who are ready to break generational cycles. She is a multi-passionate soul here to be a portal of love and expansion. She's the co-founder of the Studio Press, where she guides soul-led individuals in finding their voice through book writing and self-publishing. She's the host of her own podcast called Beyond the Surface, where she dives into conversations with guests who share stories, wisdom, teachings, and experiences to help us on our soul's evolution, healing, and growth. Speaking my language, sister.
Oh. Sometimes I hear that, I'm like, me?
Yes. All right, so welcome. I am very excited about this conversation, and I want to jump right in because you and I had started our conversation before we started recording, and I stopped you because I was so excited of where I think this conversation is going. Let's first, though, for our listeners, talk about what we mean or what you mean by breaking generational cycles.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think it always kind of starts with one person in the family. And I really believe that I have gone through the lifetimes. And that's why at such a young age, being, turning 30, but I really started my own journey of healing and especially really looking at and starting with my own family. That's really where it begins with me. And I think this work of generational healing can begin with your immediate family, your immediate circle. But then there is this whole world of ancestral healing, and you can go far into your lineages. And it's something actually that I'm exploring now is ancestral healing. And what's beautiful is we all have our blood lineage. Those are your immediate family, but we also have soul lineages too. And it's just a incredible topic that I'm diving into now. But for me, it really stems around me and my relationship with my dad and being able to not just look at us as father and child, daughter and father. It's two human beings having a human experience, and we are living our lives the best that we can. And I think it's really taking out those labels to it. And I really see my dad as another human being who has been here to teach me so much about love, about forgiveness. And I'm so grateful for him. And I had this conversation with an energy worker, and she said, your dad came here in this lifetime and did everything right. He did everything that he was meant to do. And that was him leaving my mom, his infidelity, all of that. He did what he came here to do. And I know that sounds so strange, but for me, I look at it in the lens of if I didn't have this experience or him as a father, I wouldn't be who I am.
Correct. Beautiful. I love
Yeah.
that. That's a great segue. So for those believers, that there is actually that our souls never die, we choose our parents, right? We choose our parents. We choose our experiences so that we can expand our consciousness and who we are as souls. So given that, so we might have lost some listeners, but that's okay. Let's go ahead and jump in because I want to start with your early years because I know your parents split and then sort of the catalyst for seeing your dad again after your deep loss in your family. So can we do that? Can we start in the early years? All right, let's go for it.
And so my parents were three, and I've always said how grateful I am that it happened when I was so young because I don't remember anything. I don't remember them sitting us down and having that conversation. I was born here in Toronto, but then we had moved to New Jersey, and then we were now moving back to Canada. And I don't remember anything about that time. I have no memory of it. maybe if I did some real work, I probably could remember it. Who knows? But I'm grateful. And that's simply because I think that it's been a different experience. And I think I was the baby of the family too. So my two older sisters, especially the eldest, she knew everything that was going on. She was 9 at the time. So she had a very different experience. Her experience, both my sisters' experience, has been so different from mine. I was almost sheltered and protected from, I guess, the truth for a long time in my life. I didn't know that there was infidelity in my parents' relationship. I didn't know any of this. It was just I wanted to see my dad. I wanted to talk to my dad. Like that's all I knew and all I wanted, you know? And then when birthdays would come and go, and it's like, well, we're calling and he's not picking up the phone, right? There's someone who's kind of the in between middle person of he's not here or whatever the case may be, whatever the excuse was. And so I never understood that. So I never understood my mom's pain. I never understood my sister's pain. I just knew I wanted to have my dad in my life. And
Sorry,
my
I want to
normal,
stop, just
yeah.
just want to stop you for a second. So what was happening in the household? Would your mom be vocal around her disappointment in terms of his behavior? Were your sisters vocal around
Mm.
their own anger around your father? What was that experience like?
Yeah, my normal for me was it was me, my mom, my sisters. Like that was us. Like it was we were kind of like the four of us. That was my normal. And you could see the disappointment and the frustration when we would call and there was some sort of filter or excuse as to why he wasn't talking. And there was pain in terms of her words, but no matter what, even if my sisters, like especially as my sisters start to get older, I started to really hear the anger of he's not my dad. He's quote unquote just a sperm donor. And I think I adopted that language from hearing it from my sisters blindly without knowing the actual truth. But I give grace to my mom because she also always said, whenever we said anything hurtful about him, she would cut us off right away and say, he's still your dad. Don't say any of those things. He's still your dad. But I think what also was hard and tough for my sisters and for us is that my mom really struggled. She was raising 3 daughters and she was working 3 jobs. So it's almost like find the person to blame, and it's him for all this, all the struggle and all the pain and us not seeing my mom. She was gone out of the house before we would even wake up, and sometimes we would go to sleep and be in bed and we didn't see her that day
Due to her job, due to her work?
Due to working 3 different jobs.
Wow, to raise her 3 daughters. So at this point then, your father, was he providing any child support or anything like that, or he was just
Yeah, no, it wasn't.
MIA?
It
Okay.
really was. Like he was absent. Conversations would happen very vaguely. Like there was no schedule. There was no structure to that. We did have some times where we would go to him. I remember my mom would always she would not always, but sometimes we would have those long drives. She would drop us off in Buffalo. We would do the exchange. We would spend a couple of weeks with him, but there was no consistency around this. It was kind of like a hit or miss if it was happening kind of thing. And yeah, there was no support from, again, what I know to be true, right? Like there are
What was
so many
the
truths.
what was the issue though? Did he have it? Was it just, I mean, was there addiction issues or anything like that? Or was it more just he just was a
Yeah.
coming? Yeah, okay, got it.
Yeah, it
All
was
right.
just I think it's just he did the best that he could.
Yeah.
There was definite there I know that there was infidelity, and he had his life. He had his life in New Jersey, and I think it was just I really don't even know what it is. And I think it's hard for him to go there because I've asked him. I've asked him now, being in the space that we are in. I'm like, I want to know your story. And I want you to not have a filter, because I share my perspective and my story really, really with or without his permission. I've never asked for his permission, but I also think because I come from a place of love, I never come from this place of anger anymore. And so when I tell this story, it's coming from such a beautiful place. And so that's why I think he doesn't really have an issue with me talking about it and sharing it. But I want to know his story. I want to know what he went through because I have no idea. That's the blank space. And that's another layer of the healing, I think, too, is seeing our parents as them having their own experience. And we have ours and we have our truth. And sometimes it's such a beautiful thing to actually say, but what was going on for you?
Yes, thank you. I love that because I think that we forget that our parents are whole human beings that have their own past, right? And they come with their own experiences, and not everyone is parent of the year. I mean, they're
Of
just
course.
not, right? I mean, we are flawed. We are flawed humans. So let's talk about it though, because your parents split when you were 3 and you're 30, and lots of time has passed, and this was an evolution because you weren't always this forgiving woman, right, to your dad. It was a process. So
Mm-hmm.
bring us to this place because you had talked about that you went through anger, but let's back up because you started to tell a story about the tragedy that happened within your family.
Mm-hmm.
And so can we jump
Yeah.
right in? Okay, yeah, go.
So my dad, for the majority of my life, he lived in the US. He lived in New Jersey. And in 2006, my family, and this is my cousin on my dad's side. My cousin who was 20, he was a BMX racer. Like he was on track to go to Beijing for the Olympics. He was lived, breathed being on a bike. And he was building a BMX track for kids for the community in Halton region here in Canada. And unfortunately, a freak accident, and he passed away on the track that he was building. And I feel like you probably know and can speak to this of grief and loss. It's a moment that can really crack you open, or I feel like it can probably shield you, right? Like there is that piece where it could do both. And I think for me, it was a massive awakening moment. It was hard and I didn't understand it at the time because I was very young. I was 12, 13 maybe when he passed. And I didn't understand this concept of I'm never going to physically see this person again. I couldn't understand that. It was the first loss in my family. And I saw our family do this. It was almost, we were separated for so long and we came together. We came together. And then not too long after, my dad moved back to Canada. And I thought, all right, here's our opportunity. Here's our chance to have a real father-daughter relationship.
And
And it
so
didn't happen.
just a quick, yeah, well, just a quick question. So what initiated that move back to Canada? Was it the death of your cousin? Like what brought him back?
I know there was definitely some issues. I don't think that was the sole reason, but I know that there was some issues that he had in another country, I believe it was. And I think that was also part of it too. Like he was here for the funeral and everything. And I think he never left. And that was nothing any like dramatic, but yeah, I think he just never left.
So here you are, you're 12, 13 years old. How old are your two other sisters? You're the baby, right? So how old are your sisters at this
So
point?
we're all 3 years apart. So
Okay.
yeah, we're all 3 years apart.
Okay, so at this point, do any of you have any kind of a real relationship with your father when he moves back to Canada?
Yes and no. So I think that was where my frustration was lying and stemming from. Thinking back on it was I saw him developing this relationship with my sisters, and I was very confused. I was very confused as to, and I started thinking, what did I do? Like, what have I done that I don't deserve the same communication, the same relationship that you are now having with my sisters? And so this is where I think things started to like the pot started stirring. And I was like, what the hell, man? Like, what did I do to you? And I think part of it too was I think he thought, again, like there was never a conversation, but he thought I had this whole perspective like I was being brainwashed by my mom because me and my mom were like this. And that never was the case. And that's where things started to really brew, where I saw them having this relationship and I was getting really pissed.
Yeah.
Imagine, right? You witness what you've always wanted and your two sisters have it and you're like, "Whoa, what's wrong with me? Why don't I have that with you?" And then, and again, it's kind of like things are being fast forward and then all of a sudden him and his girlfriend are pregnant, and I meet my baby brother at kind of like a family party, and I like very sneakily held him, and they were watching me, and I just had this moment, and I was like, oh my God, like I wanted to be in his life. I wanted to be in my brother's life. I wanted him to know who I was. And still at
Makes
this
me want to
point,
cry.
I know, like at that point, me and my dad still never really had a conversation. It was almost like we were having conversations through his girlfriend, who's also such a beautiful woman as well. And she was around for a very long time. And she was like, well, you need to forgive him. And I was like, but you don't know the full extent of things. And so,
Right to be angry.
yeah, like, and I do, and we do have a right to be angry. We
Yeah.
have a right to, and this is where I always say, the journey of being able to get to a place of forgiving my dad, I had to experience everything, all the emotions that came with it, the hurt, the disappointment, the anger. I had to go through that in my own time, in my own space. And, it's 2006, looking at kind of like more on a timeline, 2006, 2007 is when he kind of came back. And then my brother is born 2012. I get hit by a car crossing the street in 2015. And again, we still were
Oh, wait,
around
wait,
each
wait, wait. You
other.
can't just like jump over that. So you get hit by a car, and what happens? Do you sustain severe injuries? Like what?
Thankfully, no. Like
Okay.
I definitely I had some knee injuries, but nothing extremely serious. But I had this moment, especially too coming from a family then of now over the years, we've lost grandparents, we've lost more people in our life. And a moment like this where I get hit by a car and I'm expecting, and maybe this is also the thing of around expectation, but I was expecting people to pick up the phone and just want to hear my voice and say, are you okay? Because yes, physically my body was fine, but emotionally and mentally, I was not okay. And to not have anyone pick up the phone was devastating. Felt like a slap in the face, almost as if like I could have. People die from being hit by a car. And here we are living and breathing this message of family and closeness and love. And there was no example of that.
So you mean your dad, when you say no one, you're talking about your father never picked up the phone to say, hey.
Yeah. My
Okay.
father, even my grandmother, so his mother, nobody picked up the phone to
Wow.
to just hear my voice and say, hey, are you okay? It was like a text message or a message on Facebook. And I was like, this is what we call family.
And that's painful.
It's devastating.
Mm.
It's devastating. And it was almost like externally, it was almost like this facade, is what it felt like. The facade of everyone sees us as this close, especially after loss, but our actions actually speak louder than words. And I will take a phone call over anything, any day, especially in those moments. And it was devastating. And that again added this another layer of hurt and anger. And what's interesting, and I share this because I think it's just very interesting how our truths can be almost created in my if my me and my dad have had this argument, and where he says he picked up the phone and called me right away. And I was like, you actually believe that that's true? And it actually fascinates me that we can actually make up a truth and
Oh,
believe that.
I think that we do that all the time. I think that the
True.
narratives that we run around with are almost never true. The way
That's
we
true.
see ourselves, the things that we attach to an idea, and when we start to really think about the belief that we're attached to, it's quite easy to start dismantling it, actually.
Yeah, it's true. And I remember us getting to this kind of like a not a war, but we were definitely in an argument. I was like, I can't believe you actually think that's true. I'm actually kind of surprised, but I will just let that be.
And he also can't believe that you have your own version of the truth that doesn't match
Yes.
his. You're both equally sure
Yes.
that
Yes.
what you remember is true. That's why there's 5 siblings in my family. Of course, I lost my brother Rocky. That's why you can have 5 people at the same event and everybody has a different
Yes.
recollection of that event. It's
Yes.
crazy, right? It's crazy.
Yeah.
And perception is reality. So
Hmm.
we can sit around and we can sit in our truth
Yeah.
and fight about it, or we can learn to let it go and understand that who is right doesn't actually matter,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah. And I think that was a big part of the piece around forgiveness, because I think for a while I did carry around my mom's hurt and pain. And I also had to give myself permission to let that go and say, I'm not dismissing what she experienced. Me forgiving my dad is not dismissing that. It is the truth, and it's the truth of what we went through. And I also still get to have this relationship, and I still get to experience both. Yes, this is what we went through, but I think at some point, and I think that's what it came down to, was being young. I was being fed the stories from my sisters and my mom. And then it came to a point where I was at an age that I had to take ownership and I had to take responsibility and I had to know what was true. And I think that was a really big part, was in that moment there was a lot of blaming him for everything. And then there was this shift around having to take ownership for our relationship. And again, seeing people as human beings, one might say, well, he should have approached you rather than the other way around. And I think it actually doesn't matter. And that's why a lot of people, even in my family, have said to me, like, I can't believe you've forgiven him. Like, don't you have any hurt, because now he's gone on to have his own family and they have what you didn't have. And I was like, no, because I'm so glad he can fix, or he can have that do-over in a way. And I have compassion for that. I have grace for him in that moment too.
And can you imagine? We have all, I don't, and people know, my listeners know, I hate to call them mistakes because I really think they're just experiences of how we get to know who we are and evolve.
Yeah.
We are perfectly flawed humans, and we're here to grow and expand. And we are the only species that continuously pays for our mistakes over and over and over again. And I'm not the same person I was, right? I love to believe that I
Mm-hmm.
can keep growing and evolving and changing and not make the same mistakes over and over and over and over and over again. We have like we're when we can stop beating ourselves up, we stop
Mm.
beating others up. It does start with
Yes.
self. And so if we can hold the space for the grace of being human for our own self and have compassion, then we can extend that compassion to other people to understand that they are also a work in progress, right? We all
Yes.
are. I'd like to thank BetterHelp for sponsoring this ad. Hey guys, I want to take a minute to offer an opportunity for those of you who've been searching for a mental health therapist and haven't had any luck getting callbacks. I know it's challenging to find help, so I've partnered with BetterHelp. They are the world's largest therapy service, and they are 100% online. With BetterHelp, you can tap into a network of over 30,000 licensed and experienced therapists who can help you with a wide range of issues. To get started, you just answer a few questions about your needs and preferences in therapy. That way, BetterHelp can match you with the right therapist from their network. Then you can talk to your therapist however you feel comfortable, whether it's via text, chat, phone, or video call. You can message your therapist at any time and schedule live sessions when it's convenient for you. If your therapist isn't the right fit for any reason, you can switch to a new therapist at no additional charge. With BetterHelp, you get the same professionalism and quality you'd expect from in-office therapy, but with a therapist who is custom-picked for you. More scheduling flexibility at a more affordable price. Get 10% off right now on your first month at betterhelp.com/rockyourshine. That's betterhelp.com/rockyourshine. Now back to our episode.
Yes.
And so what happened with you and your father, because you both had to make movement. So your cousin dies, you're still quite young, you're watching your sisters form this new relationship with your father. Where is this inroad for you? When does things start to shift between you and your dad?
So it was definitely after my car accident. And I had this moment where I said, you know what? I'm going to put it all on paper. I'm going to write him a letter. And there was no filter in this letter. And we were always big like soccer fans. So whenever Euro Cup came, my dad's from Portugal, my parents are both from Portugal. So when Euro Cup came around, we were diehard fans. Like that was almost like what me and my dad, our relationship ended up being was, we would make sure to get together for the games. And one of them fell on Father's Day. And here I was handing him this lovely letter of raw, unfiltered Ashley of how I felt and the pain that I was experiencing. And I just said, read it on your own time. And I was expecting a response and there was nothing. And I was like, what? I just poured my heart out to you in this letter because at that time, I really struggled with communication. I really struggled with that. And I struggled with that in relationships with other men. I would shut down, and writing was my outlet. So I was able to really like process and sit, and I put pen to paper and I gave him this and I heard nothing. And I was like, really? I'm doing all these things. I'm making all these attempts. Like, where am I going wrong? What is going wrong here? And in between this, as I mentioned, my dad's girlfriend, pretty much wife, she was like, you got to forgive him and all this stuff. And I was like, I wrote him a letter and he hasn't said anything. Right? Like it's, here's now it's kind of like now it's in your hands.
How much time had passed before you dropped this on you?
I can't even remember time frames now at this point.
Yeah.
But Father's Day would have been June. And I feel like it was that summer, then this back and forth is happening. And I was like, listen, we either get together and we go for a drive and we talk about this, or I'm done. There's no more effort from me. And so we finally had that one day. He came and picked me up. And the other thing too, in all between all of this, we go from having this country distance to he literally lives 5 minutes from me. Like, it's just so wild how things work out. But he picks me up and we go for this drive. And at that point, I'm telling you, I don't even remember what we said to each other, but I was so ready. Like, I just wanted to see him face to face and say, I need you to know that I forgive you. And there was this moment, and I felt all of the weight that not is just on your shoulders, but literally around my heart. It's almost like just evaporated because I was so ready, and I was so ready to say, I forgive you, and I'm ready to move forward. I'm ready to forgive you and let this go.
And how old were you at this point?
It's a good question. I must have been 19, 20 at this point.
Because, I just think that it takes a tremendous amount. And you had not spoken to him since the letter, right? When you saw him this day.
No, it was just
So
communications of when are we getting together? And that was it.
because you can imagine in my work, I have seen, not just in my work, in friendships too, where people have cut their ties with their mother or their father or their siblings. Sometimes that is necessary if there is severe abuse or drug addiction, things like that. Otherwise, I feel like it really is the self-righteousness that keeps us in this separation that causes pain. It never stops causing pain. And
Mm-hmm.
so I just want to recognize that for, for you to continue to have that openness and arrive at a place of forgiveness
Mm-hmm.
is what allowed this doorway for your father to step through, because he may not ever been able to be the one to initiate that,
Of
you
course.
know?
Of course. Of course. And that's why I think for me, I dismantle the labels, because sometimes we can say, but it should be their responsibility. And that's where I think, it comes to a point, and at a certain age, it's both of our responsibilities. And I don't know what it was and why I was trying and making this effort, but I do think that was my last attempt. And I was just so beyond ready at that point to let it go. And I think that was a big part of this piece around forgiveness that I learned through him, is that I had to really be willing to let it go, because the disappointment doesn't stop. And this is why I say my relationship with him is such a beautiful journey, because even just very recently, last year on my birthday, he didn't pick up the phone and call me. And he actually, like, everyone, the good old days of just writing on someone's Facebook, happy birthday. And I was so upset. I was so hurt. And I was like, how dare you take 2 minutes to write that? And you could have just picked up the phone and called me. Like, are you serious? And so I finally told him not too long ago. He came over for Father's Day, and I had to say, I was like, listen, I just need to tell you this, and I'm gonna let it go, but I need you to know this. Don't ever do that to me again. Like, pick up the phone and just call me. And I had this moment too of realizing, because he made this comment and said, him having now 5 kids, but me and my sisters, he goes, one of you really wants me to do that and post and showcase that, and another just wants me to pick up the phone and call. And I had this moment of, this man has to navigate the needs and the wants of 5 different people. Well, even technically 6, like, we all have to navigate needs and wants of the people in our lives. And if we want those people in our lives and we want those relationships, then we're willing to do it. It's not just your own kids. It's not just your significant other. It's, what are the needs and wants of your parents? What are the needs and wants of your significant other, of your friendships? And I think I had this epiphany in this moment, and I was just like, wow, I have so much compassion, because he wasn't around for a long time. He's learning now. And if I don't communicate what I need from him, how is he ever going to know?
Yeah, and that is true in partnerships too, where my friends and I have these conversations, and we expect our partners to be mind readers, right? Like, he should know me by now, right? Like that's what we'll do. We'll get all angry.
Yep.
Hey, honey, what's wrong? Nothing. When clearly something is. And I think that we all retreat with this shell around our heart, right? We learn that as we get older to protect ourselves. And of course, it never serves anybody. It certainly
Mm-hmm.
doesn't serve our relationships. And if we do not ask and we are not clear about what we need, we cannot expect people to just know that.
Yeah.
It's the bravery. Come at everything is about love, loving ourselves enough to be able to voice our needs.
Mm-hmm.
And we do that with love. And And it's scary sometimes to state our needs because it's the child in us that is afraid of that rejection over and over again. And what struck me that day that you decided in the car that you were going to have this forgiveness and compassion for your father that opened that doorway, that was that was also a very brave move because it did not ensure anything. You said, well, this was my last effort. I don't believe that that actually is true
Who
with you.
knows?
Right. But because when we are in our truth and we speak that to people, we have no control over the outcome of what we're putting out into the world. That is true with our needs and wants in relationships. That is true that risk that we take in our professional lives, going after our dream, etc. And I think that what is striking me about this conversation is how relationships evolve, but how we're always giving each other grace. It's
Mm-hmm.
always the grace in relationships of understanding that we are just human beings trying to get it right.
Yeah. And we're on this journey of, as we understand ourselves more, then we can understand our relationships even better. And I feel like that's always just been my journey, is this curiosity to understand myself more. And then it ends up trickling into my relationships. But I think, too, one of the things that I think about as well, speaking of this moment, because it didn't ensure anything. And it really was, that was the moment that I was completely cracked open, because I saw his willingness. I saw his willingness to say, okay, we're moving forward. From this moment, we are moving forward. And it truly, I think I had, it not daddy issues, but like, I struggled to commit in relationships. I struggled with relationships, but shortly after this experience with my father, I just realized that I have two choices. I can close myself up and be closed off and protect my heart and have a shield around it for the rest of my life from all situations and all experiences. Or I can allow myself to continue to open up to love. And yes, that means that there's still going to be disappointment. There's going to be these moments. But do I want to live in fear of that happening? Or do I want to continue and experience love and joy over and over again? And I will take that over anything. And that's where I think this willingness comes from, this willingness in all my relationships to have the difficult conversations, to break these patterns, these ways that of being in. And it comes from me and my relationship with me and my mother, me and my sisters. I don't want things to just be like, all right, we're going to throw in the towel and this is what our relationship has to be. I don't believe in that. And I believe in, I'm here to experience the disappointment if that means I get to experience love over and over. Does that make sense when I say that? I don't know if
Well,
that
it
makes
makes
sense.
total sense because, I think oftentimes we think the antidote to fear is bravery and courage, but it's not.
Mm,
The antidote to fear is love.
yeah.
And I always say we only come from two places, love or fear. And, we can fear hardens the heart and love
Mm-hmm.
softens it. And so what you're saying is beautiful and it's being open to
Mm-hmm.
that. And again, I think the other thing that you said, and this is what I've meant by rocking your shine after you've been cracked wide open, is that it's that invitation to
Mm,
really get to know who we are at a much deeper level, at that soul level.
mm-hmm.
And life is about love. I mean, really, at our essence, that's who we all
Yes.
are. We're love.
And that's what
And
we're here to
and
experience.
that's
That's
what we're
why
here.
we
Yeah.
came here, is to be in love, to be
Yes.
on this journey of experiencing love. And this is why I look at, the ways that we are in our family, of like the communication. I realize that in my bloodline, communication is the thing that needs to be worked on, at least for right now. And I see that with my mom, I see that with my sisters, like I see it all around me. And it's the thing that I'm determined to that it ends with me. I don't want that to continue. And I think about, I've always been just like, I think about my past generations, and then I think about what's coming beyond me. And it's a powerful image that you can hold in your mind. But I really feel I'm taking the stance, I'm taking the role and the responsibility of it does end with me. And in me just going through and navigating this thing with my father, it trickles into my relationship with my mother. It even in my with my sisters, and with my partnership now with my fiance, and the relationship and the family that we're going to start, it impacts everywhere. Even if it's not directly, it does. And that's what I think I really believe as well, is the healing that we do, it really does impact the generations beyond you and your past generations.
Yeah, and I really appreciate that, these discussions around generational healing are quite profound actually, because when there only needs to be one person to break the cycle, and it is that level of awareness to even see that the pattern exists within a family. I was telling you, I'm not going to give too much away because it's going to be on the podcast, but this man that I spoke to, where generations had taken their own lives, spent time in prison, drug overdoses, etc. And he is the first person in his family that is here now to break that through the work that he's done and now what he's doing in the world. And I want my listeners to really hear this, because just because we do have this lineage, it only takes awareness to break the cycle. That's all it takes, and to do something different than what has been done, and what could continue to happen if we do not have that level of awareness to break that cycle. And so I'm deeply appreciative of you coming on and talking about this. I can't believe we're at the top of the hour, but I want to ask you a couple of more questions before I get to my last two. The work that you're doing now and working with people and doing that through writing, do you want to talk a little bit about that? What you're doing with, do you take clients? What does that look like?
So for me, this piece of, I think, is very new and fresh, of me realizing that I've always been in this work of it comes down to generational and breaking cycles. And so there's that aspect where I'm still navigating. It's still new. And yet I think there's this other side of who I am, is storytelling and my business around helping people write books. And there is something so profound when you put pen to paper and you type it out nowadays, but you tell your story. You give yourself this, there's this strength that comes from putting our stories out into the world. And I'm deeply glad that I went through that journey, and kind of just blindly was like, I went through this massive experience and transformation. And again, it was with my father that inspired this, and inspired me to really look at, how is this 20-year-old doing this? Like, how does this make any sense that this 20-year-old is really navigating this and beginning this journey? And I wanted to capture it. And what made it all worth it, publishing my book at 22, was this one woman who I met, who read my book, and she thanked me for sharing the story that I did of my relationship with my father, because she was in the midst of going through a divorce, and she had children. And she said, I know that my kids are going to be okay. And I can just imagine, like, going through a divorce and you worry about your kids. And she said, I know they're going to be okay. So thank you for sharing your story and sharing your journey. And my book only inspired then this like aspect of, wow, I want to help other people experience this sense of empowerment, of strength to tell their stories. And that's where, the Studio Press comes in, and helping people tell their stories and write their books. And it's just such a beautiful experience to go through when you put your story down on paper and you put it out into the world. You never
Well,
know what can happen.
well, I was going to say there's real research behind it. I mean, I wrote my whole dissertation on writing through grief, loss, and trauma. So there's a lot of research behind the healing benefits, and lots of writers have also written their memoirs, as did I, as a way to heal. And so it's very powerful to. In fact, I run a grief and loss group, and it's done through writing.
Wow.
Yeah. So I love that you are saying this because, like I said, there's true science behind it too.
Yeah.
So where can people find you?
The best and the place that I am the most active is my Instagram. I love Instagram, and it's Words by Ashley Ann. That is the place. And you'll then find the Studio Press. You'll also find my podcast, Beyond the Surface. But Instagram is the place, Words by Ashley Ann.
Okay. Yep. And we'll have that in the show notes. So I have two questions left for you to sort of bring us to a close. First question is, what does self-love mean to you?
Ooh, the loaded question, right? Interesting. The word that I think of when I think of self-love, it's never been this piece around the self-care or the physical. It is such an emotional thing that I think of, and I think it's because of the healing. And self-love is allowing ourselves to be in our fullest expression of who we are. And in order to be that expression, sometimes there is the healing that it's releasing and letting go of the stories that we have around why can't we be our fullest expression. And I think really coming down to self-love is allowing ourselves and giving ourselves permission to be all of who we are.
Beautiful. Okay. Finish this sentence for me. Hope is
everywhere around us. Yeah, hope is everywhere.
I love that. Is there anything else you'd like to share with our listeners that I haven't asked?
I just want to thank you. This was such a beautiful, soulful conversation. And I think, too, also just like a step for me to lean into this work. And so I just appreciate you so much for this beautiful conversation and allowing me to share this story that is so near and dear to my heart and has so much wisdom and teachings. And I really do hope that it gives hope to your listeners as well, just seeing the possibility when we allow ourselves to experience love.
Me too. And thank you. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story with all of our listeners. And I have the same hope I have every week, that I want to thank all of my listeners for tuning in this week, for the support that you guys give us each week. And I hope that there is a nugget that you can tuck away on your own journey. Thank you all. I love you guys. I'll see you guys next week. Bye for now.